It's difficult to say no when they give you a call and ask you if you believe in free speech. I said, why, of course. I said, well, good, we want you to come and speak free. Now I got even with you. It's been a powerful 3 hours sitting in these sessions, and Pat Truman, one of my heroes, I don't know where Pat's at, I'm sure he's in here somewhere. I think this is going to be interesting because I am no Pat Truman. Pat is an attorney, he's polished, he's worked at the Department of Justice, he knows all the laws. If you look at my background, I'm a street fighter. I was a union organizer in the trucking industry. Don't hold that against me. So I come at it from a little different perspective. I don't take any prisoners. I go after them, and I see something wrong, I try to do something about it. And though over the years when I first started CCV, I had many board members and people tell me, you just can't do that, Phil. You can't be that aggressive. Back off a little bit. And so I've tried, and we have found that loving people works better than being too aggressive. So I appreciate being here, and I have been president for 19 years, and president of Citizens for Community Values. It started actually as a result of the Billy Graham Crusade in 1977 in Cincinnati, where the pastors came together, all the denominations have brought him in. They continued to meet, and they said, what are some of the issues that we need to address? And they decided that pornography, even back then, in the early 80s, late 70s, was destroying families at a record rate, and they needed to do something about the pornography problem in Cincinnati. Well, it was the home to Larry Flint. We had strip bars and porn stores just about on every corner. Across the river in Newport, Kentucky was called Sin City. It was open gambling. It was one writer from England called it the dirtiest little city in all of America. So we had this sin image of Cincinnati, and the people got pretty fed up with it and wanted to do something about it. Well, I was born and raised in Cincinnati, and I was on the way to school one morning, 14 years old, and I found a pornographic magazine. Well, I'm a Christian young man. I go to church 3 times a week, and I found this magazine, and I thought, wow, this is exciting. I've never seen anything like, I didn't even know anything like this existed. And like one of the speakers said earlier in one of the sessions I was in, I certainly didn't go home and tell, hey mom, hey dad, look what I found, isn't this cool? I hid it and I kept it, and by the time I was 16, I was full-blown sex addict, addicted to pornography, driving downtown to Cincinnati, and when I didn't have money to buy pornography, I was stealing it. I had to have it. I didn't understand the brain back then. The things you've heard today is so powerful and so on. I've been there. I have been there. I lived it for 25 years, my addiction to pornography. Destroyed my marriage. So when they started this organization in 1983, and my pastor was one of them that helped found the organization, and they said, we're going to start an organization fighting pornography, and I thought, that's the last thing I need to do is to be involved in an organization that's going to be sitting around looking at pornography. And I had no idea what they were going to do. And I said, and my wife at the time was really aggravating and after me and said, you need to tell your story. I said, I'm not telling my story. I'm ashamed of it, and I'm trying to break free. And they had a meeting, and I found myself standing before 25 or 30 people because they were going to start this group called Citizens for Community Values, and I found myself standing before them, and I started telling my story. And I just told everything. That's just the way I was. And they kind of did a double take, and some of the people pushed their chairs away from me. A real live porn addict, look at this. We've heard about people like you. But it was, nobody ever talked about being addicted to pornography, and I was called to go public. Billy Graham did my story soon after that, and it was printed in German and French, and it was basically spread all across America through different family groups. And so I got involved in it big time because I had a story to tell, and I didn't want other young boys to have to go through what I went through. And Full Gospel Businessmen did my story, and their magazine goes into the prisons, and I started getting calls from all these prisoners saying, boy, I wish I'd have heard your story, before I got involved in it. I'm here today because of my addiction to pornography. It led to me acting out my fantasies. And and I continue to tell the story. I don't get the finger pointing and called porn freak and all that quite so much anymore when I go on radio and speak, but people do that. But I'm here because I'm called to be here. It almost destroyed my life, and now I've been free for 25 years. And the good news is that the brain can be rewired, which you heard today in some of these seminars, and it can, and it happened to me. And my wife is not here. She's almost always with me. We travel together. She does the same thing I did. She's chairman of the board and founder of the American Family Association of Indiana. She fought pornography because her marriage was destroyed because of pornography, and we actually met at a meeting in Memphis, Tennessee, where we were talking about fighting pornography. So we tell people when we're introduced that we met at a porn meeting. But she has a good reason not to be here. She has 2 children, and her oldest son was married, her daughter was married last Saturday, and the oldest son and his wife just had twin babies. So she's home with the kids, and that's a good excuse. So that makes number 9 and 10 grandchildren. I'm going to, first of all, we're going to talk about winning the war on pornography. You've heard a lot of statistics today. You've heard a lot of facts about the brain and the problems, and you heard Pat talk about the legalities and everything. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that. I'm going to talk to you, and I'm going to give you examples about how to win. Because I was shocked when I came to Salt Lake City, I think maybe it was 2 or 3 years ago for something else, and I went in and I picked up one of your giveaway newspapers, and I found that there was either 2 or 3 strip bars in Salt Lake City. I was dumbfounded. No way would Salt Lake City accept strip bars. You've got to do something about it, and I'm going to tell you how you do it. The Cincinnati story, which I'll get to in a few minutes, is quite remarkable. And when I say winning the war against pornography, I mean you can win this war. It just takes all of us together, working together, and saying we're going to do what we can, each one of us individually. I'm not asking any of you to give up your full-time job and anything else. I mean, just in your daily walk, you can win this fight. And that's what happened in Cincinnati. But the first thing I want to do is lay the foundation. You need to understand in your daily walk when you're out there and you see these types of materials, you need to divide these into three different categories. Softcore pornography, hardcore pornography, and sex-oriented businesses. These are 3 separate issues. Now, softcore pornography and hardcore pornography is basically an in-house terminology. We use it a lot, but we actually use it for a legal determination too. Softcore pornography is protected by the First Amendment. I don't like it. It's what I got addicted to when I was 14 years old, and it led to addiction to hardcore pornography. I think softcore pornography is worse than hardcore pornography, and wherever you find it, you've got to speak out. In Cincinnati, there were 95% of the stores. We have 2,800 stores in greater Cincinnati that sold softcore pornography when we started our fight. Because people said, I'm not spending my money in stores that sell. Where you shop says a lot was our slogan. And today, 95% of those stores don't sell any form of softcore pornography. And when you set the bar there, that's where the community standards are. You're not going to accept even softcore pornography. We're not talking about just trying to get rid of hardcore pornography in the sex industry, the strip bars. We're talking about the softcore pornography because that's where the kids get hooked on it first. They say there's nothing wrong with it, gas stations, everybody sells it, what's the big deal? No, stop it there. Stop with softcore pornography. So softcore pornography, by definition, is mere nudity. Hardcore pornography is what Pat Truman this morning was talking about. It's sexually explicit material that's defined by Miller versus California, lewd exhibition of the genitals, actual or simulated sexual activity. In other words, if they call it adult, trust me, it's hardcore pornography and it's prosecutable. Sexually oriented businesses, totally different animal. Softcore pornography is legal. Doesn't make it right, but it's legal. Hardcore pornography is prosecutable. Sexually-oriented businesses is a legal enterprise. You cannot outlaw them. But trust me, you can do a lot to zone, license, and regulate them. And we have. We have the action steps, the legal action that we have taken deals with, let me start with the sexual-oriented businesses and what we did. We had strip bars, like I said. Larry Flint owned a chain of strip bars in Cincinnati. Today, we have no strip bars in Cincinnati, none, or in Hamilton County, 1 million people. In fact, in the greater Cincinnati area, which is 2 million people, there's only 4 strip bars, and the closest one is 30 miles away from downtown Cincinnati. So how did we do this? It was legal action and citizen action. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about legal action, but don't rest there. You cannot depend on law enforcement and elected officials to fix this problem. I have put a percentage on this. 25% of this victory depends on legal action. 75% of it depends on you and what you do every day in your daily walk to get rid of this material. So when we cleaned up Cincinnati, we thought, wow, this worked. You know, we have no adult bookstores. We're the only major metropolitan area in the United States that does not have strip bars and porn stores. Even our video stores have been prosecuted. I'm not going to say if you came to Cincinnati and looked all over, but you might be able to find something. But if you did, we could prosecute them, and we would. But you know, that's what you get. Elections have consequences. So we have elected prosecutors, and we build relationships with the law enforcement that, you know, when we see something, we report it, and they go after it. The strip bars was a little different issue because in 1986, Renton versus Playtime Inc. was a Supreme Court case that was handed down. A little town called Renton, Washington, beautiful community, I've been there, and they wanted to open up a strip bar in the downtown district. And they said, no, you know, we're not saying you can't open, but we just don't want you here because of the problems you cause. And they said, we don't cause any problems. Well, it ended up going all the way up to the United States Supreme Court. The United States Supreme Court heard the case, and it was a very important decision. It said there was I forget 20, maybe 18 or 20 cities that were studied, that was introduced as evidence as to the harm of sexual-oriented businesses. And the Supreme Court said there's 3 things that happen when a sexual-oriented business is around: increased crime, decreased property values, and urban blight. Increased crime, decreased property values, and urban blight. And then the court said, because you have these types of problems, we're going to allow Renton to zone, license, and regulate. Zone, license, and regulate. Zoning is important. They don't need to be near churches or near schools or anything like that. That's important. I understand that. But licensing and regulating is where you can really put the hurt on them legally. We decided that we were going to go to Columbus. Columbus, Ohio had about 120 sexual-oriented businesses. And we went to the city council and we said, wow, we got a great idea here, you know, do what Cincinnati did, zone, license, and regulate these sexual-oriented businesses. And then it was finally, I got hit upside the head and realized that these elected officials didn't want to do this. They considered sexual-oriented businesses a tourist attraction. And we thought, you know, you're not concerned about the crime and property values, and they wouldn't hear us. So we went back to the office and we said, you know, wait a minute, this isn't right. So we called our attorneys in, and back in 2004, I had brought those same attorneys in because we had a threat of same-sex marriage coming into Ohio, and I told them to write an amendment to change our constitution. And in 168 days from that meeting, from May 18th to Election Day, we not only wrote a constitutional amendment protecting the institution of marriage, but we passed it in November of that year of 2004. So, and in fact, I could spend the whole seminar on that particular issue because I've been involved in that since 1996 in Hawaii, when I saw the Catholics and the Mormon Church come together, and I'm gonna tell you what, those 2 churches came together and they saved us in Hawaii, because if we had not had a chance to pass the Defense of Marriage Acts that was signed into law at the end of 1996, and then also across the states, we would have had same-sex marriage if that had passed in Hawaii. And it was those two churches that came together and made sure it didn't happen. And they also did a wonderful job in California this year. So we said, okay, I called the lawyers back in, and I said, you know, if we can change the Constitution of the state of Ohio to protect marriage, how come I can't pass a law? I can't get anyone to go along with this. And they said, well, you can. And they looked at the books. They said, you got to collect 220,000 signatures. You submit the language to the legislature. If they don't pass it in 4 months, you go back out, collect another 220,000 signatures, and we put it on the ballot. I said, good, let's do it. So we went out and we wrote the law. And the way we wrote the law was that no sex-oriented business could stay open past midnight. Nothing good happens past midnight. Everybody's grandmother's told you that. And they could not touch each other. In other words, the women that were working inside these places could not touch the men. Now let me stop right here and tell you that my attitude toward the women that work inside sex-oriented businesses who are involved in the prostitution industry, you know, these people are victims. And more than likely, they are victims of human trafficking. I used to think that they wanted to be there, that this was their choice. I have been broken over that. My wife has helped women get out of the strip bar industry, and not a one of them want to be there. So we've got to rescue these women out of these businesses by shutting them down. That's the way we do it. So we wrote the law, introduced it to the legislature, and total surprise, by 75% majority in the House and the Senate, they passed it. So Columbus, Ohio has gone from 48 strip bars down to 19 in less than 18 months. We need to do this in Utah. I just got through speaking to your representative, Bigelow, and I'm going to be working with him on the same language, and I believe that needs to go through here first. You need to, because it will regulate. If you do it statewide, then you don't have to worry about doing it city by city. You need to pass this in the state of Utah that will license. You can zone if you want to, but at least license and regulate sex-oriented businesses. Even in the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals in California, that Waukee court has actually held up. The women can't get within 6 feet of the men because the prostitution that goes on inside these places is just horrendous. So you got the legal actions. Another thing that Pat talked about was prosecution, enforcement of the federal laws, and we're going to be working that way. But we also need to enforce state laws. You have great state laws right here in Utah, just like we have in Ohio, and those laws need to be enforced. And you need to encourage law enforcement to enforce those laws. Don't let them tell you that they can't win. They can win. And if we don't prosecute, we talk about community standards, and that's what the court said. If we don't prosecute, then guess who's setting the community standards? You know, it's the pornographers. So we've got to go to court. We've probably lost half the cases in Cincinnati on obscenity cases, but that's the way the court works. This is the only law in the land where you go to court to see if a crime has been committed. Usually somebody's committed a crime, and you're going to find out if they're guilty. But basically what you do is you prosecute, you let the jury of peers look at the material, and then you decide whether or not it violates the community standards. If it violates the community standards, then they're guilty of pandering obscenity. And another thing we did in Ohio too, is we changed the penalty from a misdemeanor to a felony. We had a judge in Cincinnati probably about 3 years ago send a woman to jail for a year for selling one videotape. So we need to, the penalty needs to match the crime, because this is getting worse. So these are a couple ideas that you can do through your legislature to also bring about legal action. Citizen action, oh my. There's nothing like getting a bunch of moms mad. And that's what happened in Cincinnati. When we started our organization, the vast majority of people had no idea what pornography was. This was 1983. They were church-going people. They were people of faith. They just did not look at pornography. They didn't know what it was. So we decided at our first conference that we were going to set up 2 different rooms, one for women and one for men. We brought in a retired FBI agent and had them set up pornography in both of the rooms. And the women went through and the men went through, and they had never seen anything like that. And it's not been a good situation, but in a way it's not been bad either. The bad part of it, let me start there, was the fact that there's people that looked at it for the first time and they can't get those images out of their mind. So we don't encourage anyone to look at this material. Please understand what I'm saying. But on the other side of the coin, it made people so mad that they knew, that they saw that that type of material was out there. Now, the best thing I can do for you, if you don't know what I'm talking about here, how bad this stuff is, you go to the website truthaboutlodgenet, truthaboutlodgenet.com. LodgeNet is the company out of Sioux Falls, South Dakota, that distributes by satellite all the hardcore pornography to all the hotels around the country. And they are committing a federal felony right now by doing that. But we sent the FBI agent into a hotel, a Marriott hotel in California, and said, we want you to look at a couple movies. He did this his whole life, so this was a profession for him. And we want you to document in legal terms what's in these movies. So if you go to truthaboutlodgenet.com, that will get you an idea about what we're talking about, how bad this material is and why we need to do something. And if you have a video store, if you have anybody selling anything that they call it adult, that's what you're talking about, and that's why Utah law needs to be enforced. But citizen action, we called it a ground zero campaign when we started back in 1983 with all these convenience stores selling hardcore pornography, selling softcore pornography. So we said, pick the store closest to you, find one that's selling softcore pornography, because you're probably a customer, and go in, give the manager or the owner a packet of material and say, this is what you are selling. It is causing harm. And there's plenty of material out there now that you can have. I mean, the new study, The Social Cost of Pornography, is a great book, a great resource as well. But we went in and we told them, you've got 30 days. 30 days to get rid of the material. And if you don't, then we're going to picket. And we did, for those that didn't. Well, trust me, these are the places that get rid of the pornography first, because they're not in the business of selling pornography. They're in the business of selling gas and eggs and milk. And so that's how we got to the point where 95% of the stores don't even sell Playboy now in the greater Cincinnati area. We brought about prosecution because we wrote letters. We signed petitions. And it isn't because you think that your prosecutor is not doing his job. This is a law that's enforced because of community standards. If you're a prosecutor, wherever you're at, whatever district you're in, and you have a place that's selling hardcore pornography, and you as citizens don't object, then they're just going to figure that's the community standard. So you need to write letters. You need to make phone calls. You don't need to go in and look at the place. For example, you go into a video store and they say they have an adult section in the back room. Call the police department, call the prosecutor, and say, would you please investigate? I think there's a crime being committed here. It's against the Utah law to sell obscene material in this state, so will you investigate and get back to me? That's their job. And that's how you bring about the prosecution, and that's why you can win as citizens. Picketing, I mean, I was a union guy. I was from the trucking industry. Picketing didn't bother me at all. But boy, there was a lot of people that you could hold a gun to their head and they wouldn't picket, but they would write letters. So you got to find out, what is your niche? I mean, if you don't mind getting out in front of a store, and I'm not talking about being radical, I'm talking about you call the police department ahead of time, you tell them what you're going to do, you dress nice, and you be respectful. You don't try to block traffic or anything like that, but you just educate people about this place is selling pornography. Shop somewhere else. And, it really is important. People of faith understand, the tithing principle of supporting the church or wherever you go to church. But it's also important where you spend the 90% of your money. So be careful where you spend your money. Don't spend it with organizations and companies that are trying to tear down the family. So citizen action is incredible, and it works. And it's 75% of the fight. Because if law enforcement and the police department and the elected officials see you out there on the street taking a stand, they're going to do more. I had planned to show a video here, and it was actually a true story based on some people that have been harmed in Ohio. And I'm not going to show that because it is really, really, really heavy. And I want to finish this conference on an upbeat. I want to finish this conference and send you out of here with winnable tactics, winnable things that you can do. And I hope that's what I'm doing here by giving you a success story about what's happened in Cincinnati and some other cities. Louisville, Kentucky, about 5 years ago, we were asked to come down there. My wife and I have been in all 50 states in the last 10 years, putting on seminars and talking to people, and some people have moved forward, some haven't. Louisville, Kentucky, 5 years ago, they had over 100 sexually oriented businesses. And they formed an organization called ROC, Reclaiming Our Culture Kentuckiana, because it splashes over into southern Indiana and Louisville. And they have eliminated more than half of them. In fact, if any of you get the Citizen magazine from Focus on the Family, a monthly publication, his picture is on the front. His name is Brian Wickens, and he's an attorney who was called to this fight and surrounded himself with great people like you have here on UCAP, and they moved forward and they went out and they're changing laws and they're working as a team, and their crime rate is dropping. There's no question that these places cause increased crime, decreased property values, and urban blight. The industry sued us as soon as we passed a state law, and our laws have been upheld all the way up, and they're going to try to appeal it to the United States Supreme Court, which they can if they want to, but we're still going to win. Okay, I've covered law enforcement. 75% say it's enforced by the law. 75% of the people through polling by Morality and Media. They do a poll either every year or every other year. Polling, when you explain it that there's a federal law against selling hardcore pornography, 75% of the people say we want the law enforced. And yet today, Pat and I and several other pro-family leaders have met with the Department of Justice. We've actually met with the FBI, and they are stubbornly saying, they're just not going to enforce this law. And what they actually told us, this is what came out of their mouth, unless it includes children, animals, or torture, we're not going to enforce the law. And that's not what Miller versus California says. That's not what happened under Pat Truman when he was chief of the Child Exploitation Obscenity Section. They put people in jail and they took their properties. So we need to get back, and you need to stay in touch with what he's doing in the war on illegal pornography. The zoning, I touched on that. I would suggest that you go locally with that. The problem with this place that's here is that once they're open, they're grandfathered. So when we went to the city fathers in Cincinnati and said we want to zone, they said, "Are you nuts? We don't have any of these places, and you want to zone a place for them to open?" He said, "You don't understand. If you don't have any zoning, they can open up anywhere they want to. And once they open, then they're grandfathered." And so we finally got through to them. We zoned 6 different areas in the greater Cincinnati area where they could open, down by the garbage dump, out by the scrap junkyard, car junkyard. I mean, seriously, that's where we put them. And you don't have to give them prime real estate. And so that's what we did, and we've had zoning now for almost 10 years, and not one of them's open. But I wonder why. But the licensing and regulating, I've said that, you can do that here at the local level. Even if you have trouble at the state getting it through, you can do that right here at the city level. You can do zoning, licensing, and regulating. So that needs to be done immediately. You need to license and regulate these places. Typically, midnight has been the time that's been accepted by the Supreme Court as a time to close, because the Supreme Court has said you have between 6 a.m. and midnight. You've got 18 hours to exercise your free speech rights to exotic dancing. That's enough time. You don't need any more time than that. And plus the fact that all the problems and everything usually happen past midnight anyway. So the courts have upheld that. And then also stopping the touching. And trust me, these places will not stay in business if you do these regulations, because so much of what they do is illegal inside these places. I have not seen one sexual-oriented business, a strip bar, that could operate legally. Usually there's all kinds of drugs and other problems inside these places, and it's destroying men's lives and the women that are inside these places. So you can even start here at the city level. Letters, visiting officials, phone calls. Again, like I said, I'm not asking you to do this full time. I'm just saying that there's, just in your daily walk, look for these things. Look through the eyes of a child when you go into a gas station, or you go into a grocery store. I don't care, even if it's not Playboy or anything else. Maybe it's Cosmopolitan or something. We had a lady in Cincinnati once who had she knew what she was doing. She got all this big load of groceries in her cart, And she put ice cream in the bottom, and she walked around for about half an hour, and pretty soon the ice cream was melting, and she went up and get ready to check out, and she says, "What are these filthy magazines doing here?" Real loud, and they come running over. "I'm sorry, what's going on?" Says, "What are you doing?" "I don't want to look at this stuff. I don't want my kids looking at this stuff, when they're checking out in the checkout lane." And she says, "Well, if that's the kind of business you're going to do," and she just walked out of the store. Left the cart there. I don't recommend that. I'm just saying that there's some of you out here that would do that. I know that. You don't have to raise your hand. But I'm telling you, that's the type of tenacity, and that's the time of, I don't care what kind of personality you have. You got to be involved in this fight. And whatever God has given you as a gift, it might be letter writing, it might be picketing, whatever it is, determine what you're going to do. Don't wait to be told what to do. It happens instantaneously. When you see something wrong, you do something about it. Silence is acceptance. That's been our saying for 29 years. If you see something wrong and you're silent, you're part of the problem. You've got to speak up, and you can do it in love. Education. My goodness, you've got tremendous amount of resources right here in Utah, probably more so than any other place in the country, of professionals and people that have come out with education. We just ordered 500 of the new books, Social Cost of Pornography, and we're going to be using that and passing that out. We're going to try to get it into the schools. We're going to try to get it into businesses, so that they can pass it out to their employees. Why shouldn't everybody understand the social cost of pornography and try to get help? Socialcostofpornography.org, if you didn't get that, is where you can find the research there. Now, we have some other websites. Let me see if I've got this. No, I guess I don't. Our website is ccv.org. ccv.org, if you wanted to go there, download some information. It's basically a library. We have a manual. We're going to be upgrading the whole web page probably within the next month, but we have a manual in there called The Power of One. It tells you what one person can do. We also have CCV Action. We have a C4. Never dreamt we would need this, because this is for lobbying. When we need to go lobby and we need to be more involved in the State House or at the Capitol, we need to do that. There we have a C4. We also have Ohio Election Central. Voter registration, voter information, and getting out to vote is probably the one most important thing on why we have been successful. We know, we question every candidate that's running for public office in the state of Ohio every year. Last year it was 16,000 candidates. We send every one of them a questionnaire, running for judge, township trustee, city, whatever it is. We send them a questionnaire, and part of that is not only about pro-life, but it's also about taxes, but it's also about, do you believe that obscenity laws should be enforced? Do you believe that licensing, zoning, and regulating sexual-oriented businesses is the right thing to do to the fullest extent of the law? We get these people on record. We've had 2 prosecutors, I can give you 2 examples, that just totally they actually run us out of their office. And we have a PAC, CCV Action PAC. And so we fired up the machine, and we found somebody and took both of them out of office in the primary. I mean, that's the type of hardball. But that's being red-blooded American. If you don't agree with what somebody's doing, then do something about it, right? I'm tired of screaming in the darkness. I want to do something. Then we also have another webpage, Family First PAC, which is a sister organization that interviews all the candidates and asks them, where they stand on these issues, and they make endorsements and give money. Well, I hope you feel encouraged. I hope that what I've brought to you and what we've done in Cincinnati has encouraged you, and there's been many other cities. My wife has had much success in Indiana, and this statewide law that I was talking to you about, 8 other states have already done this with licensing and regulating at the statewide level, so I think that's something that we need to look at, and I'm willing to work with you on that. But I want to point blank ask you, this is the end of 3 hours of incredible opportunity, and I saw you taking notes. I saw you. You people are determined. I can tell it. I can tell by the way you're walking around here and asking questions. But I'm going to ask you point blank, are we going to go to war against the pornographers in Utah? Are we? Okay. Are you going to do something about it when you leave here? Does the battle start now? Does it start now? Are you ready? Okay. All right. No longer do the pornographers and the strip bar owners dictate to our community standards. We do. Thank you very much.